Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into some absolutely fascinating research by Oluyomi Oladevid. We're going to see how she completely reframes education, taking it from what we typically view as just a personal milestone and elevating it into a massive macroeconomic engine. If you've ever wondered why some nations absolutely thrive while others struggle, her insights are going to be a total revelation.
So think about this for a second. If I asked you to name a country's absolute most valuable resource, what's the first thing that pops into your head? We usually picture tangible stuff, sprawling factories, massive oil reserves, maybe vaults of gold. But she points us in a totally different and honestly a way more powerful direction. She challenges us to look right past the physical infrastructure and focus on the people. She argues a country's greatest wealth doesn't sit in a vault, it sits in a classroom.
To answer that, we're going to follow her roadmap right here, looking at the two types of capital, the shift to the knowledge economy, who actually pays for all this education, the different levels of learning, the whole quality versus quantity debate, and finally, the true return on investment. Let's get right into it.
All right, part one, the two types of capital.
First up, she really makes us stop and rethink what the word capital actually means today. It's not just cash in the bank, right? She sets up this brilliant comparison. On one side, you've got physical capital. Think buildings, machines, technical equipment, raw materials. But then over on the other side, you have human capital. This is the collective knowledge of the people, their skills, their abilities, and their productive attitudes. And here's the kicker. While physical stuff is obviously great, she argues that human capital absolutely reigns supreme. Why? Well, because human capital drives the entire production process. Without people who have the knowledge and skills to actually operate, maintain, or innovate on those machines, physical capital is literally just sitting there gathering dust. She points out that economists even prove this by showing how income distribution is way higher for people who own human capital compared to those who just own physical assets.
Which brings us to part two. Enter the knowledge economy. Now, she tracks this massive global shift that really took off in the 1990s. We moved into what she defines as the knowledge economy. This is a stage where the supremacy of human capital is the absolute main driver of growth. The countries winning today, they're the ones prioritizing investments in creating, adapting, and spreading knowledge. And she makes this crucial point for developing nations. Poor countries don't actually have to invent everything from scratch. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. They can literally leapfrog their development challenges just by absorbing advanced global knowledge and adapting it to their own local needs. But of course, to pull that off, you need an educated populace.
And she is definitely not alone in thinking this. The big global governance institutions are completely on board with her. Just look at the United Nations. They cemented this exact philosophy right into their Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG 4. The global blueprint demands equitable, universal access to quality education at every single level, from early childhood all the way through to vocational and tertiary training. So top economists and global leaders all agree with her, human capital is the absolute key to sustainable development.
Moving on to part three. Who pays for education?
All right, so if human capital is the ultimate asset, we have to ask, who's actually footing the bill for all this? She breaks it down into three distinct groups of investors, and each has their own specific motivation. First, you have households. Families, investing their time and hard-earned money because they want higher future earnings and a better quality of life. Makes sense, right? Next, we have firms. Employers are paying for on-the-job training, or sometimes even pre-employment schooling, to directly boost their workers' productivity. But interestingly, she notes that when small or medium-sized businesses just don't have the budget or capacity to train workers, that's when the third agent steps in: governments. Public spending kicks in to promote basic social welfare. Governments heavily subsidize education because, at the end of the day, widespread literacy directly fuels a vibrant economy.
Let's dive into part four, the levels of learning. Let's take a look at this portfolio of assets and see how she categorizes these investments. She maps it out beautifully across three main tiers. Primary education is the absolute bedrock. It gives you the basic skills you need for a lifetime of learning. She even points to studies showing that when girls and women get a primary education, it actually leads to healthier families and fewer infant deaths. But the roadblock here is often constrained public funds, which creates this huge urban-rural divide. Then we step up to secondary education. This level is vital because it actively combats child labor and builds critical social skills. Yet, developing nations face massive hurdles here too, like a persistent gender gap that's often tied to primitive customs or early motherhood. And finally, tertiary education, universities, advanced institutes. This is where the magic of R&D and true technological progress happens. The biggest challenge here? The massive quality gap between developed and developing nations.
Now for part 5, quality versus quantity. And here is where she hits us with a really crucial reality check on how we actually measure the success of all these investments. A government can go out and build 1,000 new schools, boast about their massive education budgets, and show off sky-high enrollment numbers. But as she directly points out, that just shows a commitment to education. It does not equal actual educational achievement. I mean, just putting a kid in a seat does not mean they're actually learning the skills they need to survive in the knowledge economy. So, how do we measure true quality? She points us toward the World Economic Forum's sub-pillars. If you want to build real human capital, this is the stuff that actually matters. You have to look at the real quality of primary schools, the rigor of math and science curriculums, and the strength of management schools. And she also highlights this distinctly modern metric, internet access in schools. Remember that idea of leapfrogging by absorbing global knowledge? Well, to bridge the digital divide and actually do that, getting students online and improving pedagogy is just as critical as building the physical classroom itself.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 6, the true ROI. Let's look at the true return on investment she outlines, especially for developing economies that are grappling with high levels of rural underdevelopment. Simply throwing general education at the problem isn't always enough. She lays out a highly specific, actionable strategy here. She argues that education can be a direct vehicle to eradicate underdevelopment, but only if it's adapted to the specific peculiarities of rural populations. What does that mean? It means focusing heavily on vocational skills, community development, and family improvement education. When you tailor the education directly to the actual occupational needs of a community, you don't just educate them, you dramatically accelerate their rural development.
So bringing all of her core arguments together, she decisively proves that investing in education is not just some nice social initiative. It's not a charity project. It is the literal engine for economic survival and higher living standards. Human capital dictates a country's entire pattern of development and its ability to adopt new tech. But, and this is a big but, to get these massive returns, like better health, higher incomes, and a booming knowledge economy, you absolutely need deliberate, sustained policy and serious public funding, starting with universal basic primary education as that essential bedrock.
Based on all her brilliant insights we've gone through today, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on regarding your own local economy. Look around at the policies and the budgets being passed right now. Is your country merely focused on the quantity of things, just building schools and filling seats? Or is it actually doing the hard work of building true human capital? How you answer that question might just determine your entire economic future. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.